Okay, it's 5 o'clock or 5:01. I'm now calling, we have a quorum of the Conservation Commission, which is 4. And so I'm now calling the meeting to order. Reviewing the agenda, we have just one item to go over comments on the Farm Road Homes 40B project, unless there's anything, some emergency or urgent matter in the last 48 hours that anyone has. Okay, hearing none, we will continue with the agenda that we have. And I see that Matt, I think, is also now joining us. Give him a second to connect. That Leland Hull is here. Is that because of the issue of, I guess I will approach, I'll say, we have a quorum. To Leland Hull, we're only dealing with the 40B project today because it's a very limited time and project, and we're not dealing with any of our other regulatory permitting processes until a week from today at our regular meeting. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I am, hopefully everybody sees a shared screen. Is that true for everybody?
Yep.
And it's even, hopefully you can read it. That we had a revised draft that I did quickly from after our last Thursday's meeting. And then on the right-hand side, there's some edits that were done by Kurt, and I was reacting to some of them. And then on the right-hand side, that is. On the left-hand side, there's more edits that were done by Carol, which were primarily adding in some material at the end here. So even though we have 2 files, we can primarily start working from the one on the right, and we can see, I think, trying to think if I moved everything over from there. I think I missed this comma here, observations. Okay, I'm going to take a plunge that I'm going to take an attempt at raising 2 overall issues that might guide us how we go through this thing here, and then each of you can react to this thing. One is a point that beginning here about our issues, our concerns about the project. And I had written the draft as that it's somewhat related to the scale and density. And then I also added the word design of the project that leads to it, so that changes in those, in the scale or density and the design, could mitigate some of the issues that we raise here. Kurt had raised the issue of whether project design alone could mitigate some of these issues, if I understood you correctly, Kurt. So I guess I'd like to just sort of start off with what that, for some of the, I would say that we need both issues in the sense that both aspects, scale and density, as well as design, that both of them are factors in the adverse impacts that we're trying to avoid here. The design being, for example, things like, right, could the septic systems be located in a different place in terms of their density close together and their proximity to wetlands? And that would certainly make a difference on the potential wetland impacts. And on the other hand, the scale and density makes a difference too, in terms of the fact that there's a significant, depending on where it is again, but also this project does have a lot more, as I was writing there, a lot more bedrooms per acre than a standard lot. So there is also a density issue here that could have an impact. So for water quality, in terms of the septic stuff, I think it could be a mix, either one of the two. But obviously, less density or scale could make a difference, as well as a different design. The same for the stormwater. I think that both of them apply in terms of what kind of design there is for stormwater management, as well as the sheer magnitude of the stormwater management issue when you have 16% of the surface is impervious. So I would like to suggest that we have both factors, kind of scale / density and design of the project, as driving some of our comments. And I will stop there to get people's feedback about that overall issue. People can just start talking, since it's hard to see the people. Just, you don't have to raise your hand or anything, just talk.
Yeah, I'll just by way of explaining a little bit those particular comments. And this is partly me, still sort of getting up to speed and understanding, our role and also understanding this particular, exercise in providing these comments. So, I wasn't sure if the commission was being asked to sort of simply react to the proposed project as it is and raise concerns, which is what I think that's what we're doing here. So my thinking was if the issues, if the concerns we have with the project were adequately addressed, then we wouldn't have concerns with the scale and density, because there wouldn't be those issues that we're worried about present. So I think we're really kind of saying the same thing. It's just a matter of how we say it. So I don't have a great issue with keeping a scale and density in there, and I do like the addition of design. But that was sort of the genesis of those comments and sort of where that came from.
So we'll just try to keep both the concepts in there. And then anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's good to have all of those things in there, because I mean, I'm not necessarily gonna know in advance. Just looking at it right now, like, those are potential concerns, and we're not gonna tell Mass Housing or the applicant at this stage how to fix it. And maybe the design will solve the problem, or maybe a change in scale will solve the problem. And certainly in the past, I know Mass Housing has had concerns about things like scale and density in other projects elsewhere. So I just think we should throw it out there, and we're not committing to one thing. All those issues could, like you said, potentially be reviewed and addressed during the process. I mean, that's the whole point of the process. I don't really.
Okay, so unless anybody objects to the sort of scale, density, and design of the project issues, that we have that scope there.
Michael, I had one thing in the first paragraph, and it's really just more of a style thing. Rather than saying, affecting the goals, I think we should, reference like the official, like the interests that we're talking about, rather than goals, and make it more about, those are our official interests we're charged with considering.
Right. Yeah. I was trying to get away from jargon. That's why I used the word goals as opposed to interest. I could say / interests. I was just trying to make it a little bit more, because we do list these items here are the ones from the interest from.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could just add the word in there. I just was trying to avoid jargon.
I mean, that's just our regulatory mandate. So I thought we should.
Yeah, I'll just add the word in there.
That's cool.
That addresses your issue. A second broader issue is, again, this issue down here.
Oh, sorry. I had one other thing there.
Yeah.
For the water supply one, so the interest is public and private water supply. So would we want to include both of those just because at this stage, we don't know if this project is going to be a public water supply? I think it's more inclusive.
Okay, sure, done.
Sorry.
No,
Back
no,
to your next point.
I'm going to scroll down to this issue here about what it is. I see Marion's here. What verb we use, so to speak, or what we're actually asking of mass housing. The difference between whether we're trying to make them aware of these potential problems, issues, versus that we're advocating for that we're actually advocating for some sort of design and scale changes that might avoid these problems. I mean, a lot of this is going to come down to how the select board wraps this into the main letter, which is probably the most important place, and maybe it's not too much of an issue at our level. So I just wanted to, I was using a more stronger, would advocate for some design change. Scale.
Yeah, and again, because this was my comment, I'll just jump in. I just wasn't sure advocate was the right.
Yeah, I'd be open to some other word. I wasn't so.
Because my understanding is that mass housing is considering the site. This is part of the site approval process. So I think the outcome here, eventually mass housing is going to make a decision. So I'm not sure mass housing is doing any advocacy at this point. I think if anything, we are advocating at this.
Yeah, that's true. That's what I actually meant.
So that was sort of where I came with that. In terms of,
it's whether reflect or consider in its decision. I guess we're asking them to factor it into their decision process.
Yeah, so I feel strongly about be aware.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I understand that, and I understand how advocate, right?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
For that
makes a lot of sense.
I was just trying to get, okay, let's let the select board person who's trying to put this all together make a comment. Marion?
Yeah, this is my homework for tonight, late into the night, I think. You can advocate for a specific change if you like. I mean, the outcome of this letter is not going to be mass housing saying yes or no, and that's it. The outcome will be a response from mass housing to the developer, giving him all kinds of heads up as to what will be expected in the comprehensive permit application. So you can raise general issues, or you can even suggest improvements. I mean, you don't want to get into details because the plan is not yet cast in stone, but
Right.
the fact that it's not cast in stone is partly the point. He still can alter the plan before he submits a comprehensive permit. And that's part of what Mass Housing's letter to him is going to be aimed at, giving him instructions as to how the plan could be improved and be more acceptable to the town.
Yeah, I'm trying to I don't want to get hung up on this. The select board, yeah.
That makes sense.
I would take out the select board. I would just say in that sentence, it's important at this stage of the process that mass housing take into consideration these potential problems given our towns, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
better than.
Okay.
That's exactly.
Yeah, that I'm like on the same wavelength as Kurt. I'm like, let's just say that.
That's
Yeah, I
better
didn't see anything about the select board in there. I would have asked you to remove it. That's right.
than.
Well, we were lobbying the select board, but I guess, okay, fine. So we've at least got this agreed here.
Michael, one question I'd have for you here is there a recommendation we might have to ask the applicant to do any kind of specific analysis that will help guide both Conservation Commission and Mass Housing in how to evaluate this issue? Did you have anything in mind? Because this might be the place to suggest that.
I have a feeling we have all those tools there. I don't think that it's an issue that comes up later.
Okay.
Like with the wildlife study. I mean, in the end, we have tools, take consideration. Actually, what I was going to come back to here is I would still take consideration. Whoops, God, this thing is, right. I guess I'm trying to see if I back off, if it's just take into consideration possible design and scale changes that could avoid these potential problems. Is that going too far for people?
Well, I think it's the developer that should take into consideration the changes. Mass housing is not going to.
They wouldn't say anything about it, about that kind of issue.
Not specific changes that you may enumerate.
I'm just talking about where they would say scale issues make a difference. So therefore,
Maybe.
I don't think they're gonna get that granular.
I would think that they could make a comment that scale issues.
Well, they would make I would assume, based on, responses we've had in the past, that they will make comments and say, please take these into consideration if they're like, these are valid local concerns. Rather than, mandating something unless something is like grossly out of control, it's not.
Yeah, they're not going to redesign the project for them.
Exactly.
No, but I thought they would make a general comment that there's enough, whether it's some of the wetlands issues, whether it's some stormwater issues, and maybe some drinking water supply, that they would say that maybe the scale is too dense or too large for the local conditions.
I don't think they're going to go that far with it.
Really? And then when they make comments in other places, I thought that's what the kind of general feedback they do give. But okay, I guess, because I'm not sure what take into consideration even means then. How would they even take it into consideration if they're not going to make any comments like that?
Michael, one thing that this calls to mind is the fields of Sherborn, where I know that during the process, one of the pieces of input we gave was regarding the level of, I think you would remember better, whether it was nitrate loading into the wetlands or, I think that might be a specific thing that we could point to, is the impacts of, localized septic into the wetlands. And you are much closer to that. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The question is what we're asking them that,
well, that's what I'm saying.
if we're not talking to them at scale, giving them, I'm not sure that those specifics are going to make a difference if we're not asking them to take into consideration with regard to the design and scale, to consider possible changes or suggestion for changes. Otherwise, why even write this thing for mass housing if mass housing doesn't have, at this stage in its process, would not make comments about the design or the scale that are even general. Otherwise, we have our own mechanisms for dealing with that with the comprehensive permit and the NOI. So that's partly why.
I would think maybe, we're raising these issues at this point. Mass housing is going to take this information and make recommendations to the developer. And the recommendation might simply be, you need to be aware of these potential water quality issues.
Yes.
And then the developer, it's on the developer then to be able to adequately address these concerns. And maybe that is through reducing, the scale or density of the project, or maybe it's through design changes. But I would think it sort of happens that way rather than mass housing being compelled to mandate, project, significant project changes at this stage.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah,
if it goes that way, but in the end, we're not doing anything. Then
But just looking at the letters that they've sent to the town for previous projects, like the one on Hunting Lane, it's, they're looking at whether this project is generally eligible. And I think that's pretty broad strokes. Like, you're not attempting to build a skyscraper, next to a farm, like very broad strokes. And then the municipality provided all these comments, and we think you should address this, and this in your application.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah.
Okay, I mean, that has no real, right, okay. Maybe nothing they say really has much muscle or anything, because anything we're saying here, we can just address with the ZBA and the NOI process. So there's
Yeah.
really nothing here that even all the time we might spend wordsmithing this thing, there's really little.
Right.
Unless mass housing would say that does have a little weight, but maybe there is no weight to what they're doing, other than saying that, I mean, unless they could make a decision to say, okay, for this site and these local conditions, the project is a little too big, scale it back. Shy of them taking a position like that, then there's relatively little outcome of any.
Well, it's not exactly true, Michael. I mean, as what Courtney said is correct. The mass housing does give instructions to the developer. And it's not just, well, you might consider this. It's like, you must address this in the comprehensive permit process. And of course, the town will make them do that anyway, but it gives
That's what
no
I'm saying.
weight that mass housing said so.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, so just to tell you what it says in other ones, like it said, you know, the applicant should be prepared to discuss blasting. The applicant should be prepared to discuss this. Those are like, that's the exact wording that we've
Yeah,
got.
no, okay, in that case, they would have to do that anyway in front, just to get a ZBA permit. So there's no
Right,
real,
but making it official and
okay, fine. To me, I guess it doesn't seem to have a lot of bite to it, so, but that's
it
okay.
does
It
not.
does lend some weight, Michael, so yeah.
Okay, let's move on, since maybe we're deciding that there's not a lot of weight.
Michael, I think to me, what is positive about including it here is it flags these general issues that we think are important to the project and that the applicant should be considering. We're letting mass housing know. So we're at the very beginning of the process. I don't think there's a reason to eliminate this simply because later it'll come up again.
Well, no, I'm not saying to eliminate. I'm just saying it's not worth being harder on the language where I would say, where I would like to think if they would weigh in on the scale at this point, then I would put more direct wording about that. But if we're assuming they're not doing that, then I let go of the issue of design and density. That asking them to weigh in on design and density in a general way, given problems. But okay, then let's, given the general consensus, I don't want to beat a dead horse and take everybody's time here because we got to finish something soon. Then I guess we've dealt with the sort of water quality issue here. And we just leave it with this kind of wording. The stormwater management and flood control. We basically have this issue. We have the issue of basically we have the observed previous high waters. We have issues of whether there's land subject to flooding and whether there's essentially there was a line in yours on the left about the fact that, right, whether they will need to deal with the issue of whether they're planning to put buildings in a road in an area that is part of not isolated, it's bordering land subject to flooding. And they just have to address it. It's just a concern that we have. I mean, I simplified it almost too much here, maybe too much for you, for what you wrote, Carol. There's significant quantity problem. This can be a significant quantity problem for the existing pond and its related land subject to flooding. As the current plan seems like it.
Well, Michael, I think I like the way I think it's fine to include this as well as the separate, more specific about bordering land subject to flooding, because this is more specifically about stormwater management. I mean, it's just address that general topic. I don't know, Courtney, if you or anyone else has other thoughts on that, but I kind of like separating them out.
I almost want to save these comments for like the ZBA process or something. You know what I mean? Like, we're just going to bring up the general topics of concern and not go into crazy detail about what needs to be done or considered. I almost feel like that's going to come at the next step, because when we're working with the ZBA in terms of like, you know, our bylaw sort of thing before we even get to the NOI.
I feel like it's better to let the state know as well. That's where I kind of feel like it can't hurt to include this. If the select board decides, well, some of this is too specific and we're gonna take it out, but that's where I felt like it was worth including the 2 sections on bordering land subject to flooding and fragmentation.
I think we should include the topics, especially, you know, that there's concerns about the observation of the flooding, and it might, you know, it might be an additional resource area that has to be considered.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to like talk about like how to go about determining it.
Yep.
Because like I mean, the applicant's going to know how to do that.
That's fine. You know what?
Yeah.
I included that there. You can.
Yeah, I like what you say in the
guidance. Yeah. If we just include the link to guidance, that I really was summarizing the guidance from the state.
Yeah, but for them, right, I guess, right, I don't think they're gonna, I guess I'm like, right.
Yeah, they're not going to review that.
And what they're factoring, I guess I was thinking to add in something about land so limits, that the quantity problem limits water capacity based on observations of high water.
So,
I was going to say
realistically-
something about there is the potential, there is the potential, I guess, that that land, I was going to add the thing about buildings subject to flooding. May extend into areas that are designated for buildings.
Exactly, because realistically, what they're going to come back with is, you know, the applicant should be prepared to discuss, you know, the potential for, you know, flooding into areas that are proposed in the plan. You know, they're not going to go look at the regulations. Mass Housing isn't going to go look at the regulations, but they would recommend they would tell the applicant to go and be sure to address these things during the permitting.
So I think that's fine to add that there, but I think we need to include the section that town residents have observed seasonal flooding so that they're.
Just have reported observations of previous high water levels.
Well, I think we need to be a little more specific that they've observed seasonal flooding that extends from the large pond into the field and to the existing driveway. I mean, that's what we've actually heard.
Yeah, but
And
that's,
I think to say observations of previous high water levels, it doesn't make it clear that there actually was seasonal flooding that is well beyond what's currently, you know, delineated. So I feel pretty strongly that we need to include that sentence.
I guess I find it sort of the observations, because
Well,
I feel like I don't want to put too much emphasis on it, given my own observations of that. Down to the existing driveway, right?
Well, Michael, you know, I think a lot of people in town, as Tom Trainer said, have seen that. But the main thing, I don't know if you heard, maybe it was at the Board of Health, that one of the abutters commented that somebody who was doing maintenance on the property frequently saw this flooding happen to the extent that they couldn't maintain the driveway. So it's not a question. I mean, obviously.
So you just want that sentence in there.
Well, Michael, the reason I wrote it this way, and I said, if these observations are verified, is I wanted to be really clear that this has been reported, it needs to be verified, and that I also said photographs, videos, or historical records may also assess. I mean, I'm not saying that we know for sure it's happened. I'm saying this needs to be verified.
Yeah, but it's not going to be, it's nothing. It gets into the complications of how you define land subject to flooding and to what extent that's something that we could still open up as a delineation, or is this part of the stormwater standards work? We have
Well,
some
that's
other.
why I did,
that's-
that's why I did include both paragraphs and said the
Yeah,
applicant.
but I think it's something we're going to have to resolve. This is something we're going to do as part of our regulatory process. And I'm not sure what it means other than highlighting that this flooding issues there to be dealt with at this level with mass housing. So I don't feel like including that. We'll just have to decide what other people think and whether I stick in this thing here, whether some combination of these sentences here. So I guess I need to hear others because I don't want to include all of that. I don't think it's going to make a difference to them, and it dilutes from the issue. But
I mean, I would suggest including the paragraph that says to determine the BSLF's boundary, it's necessary to document it. And the applicant should conduct a flood study, because that is a recommendation that they could make to the applicant. And that would be the way to clarify whether there actually is, whether there's land.
We might have to do that anyway. And then they could just suggest it. We have a regulatory issue whether we can or cannot require that. I don't think mass housing is going to make a difference on that. Do you think?
My understanding from listening to what Marianne and other people were saying is that we may be pointing some things out that then are going to be flagged by mass housing as something that the applicant needs to do. And I think it's better to point these things out earlier in the process and give them that information so they can make that recommendation. So I agree that, if you think this is too long, I'm fine with that, but I think it's a good idea to say that.
I don't think any of it's binding, though. If it says, you should be prepared to discuss this. I mean, that's not
right. It's not binding.
It's not binding, and it'll be up to the ZBA or us during actual permitting processes to make sure it's addressed the way we want.
All right, but can I jump in for a sec? You're not the only board that's brought up the stormwater issue. And I think the select board sort of summary is going to have to make a statement that includes some concern about stormwater along Farm Road or around the pond, but without giving details of what should be done. That's up to the developer to figure it out. But you can express concern. And even though what the data you have in hand does not indicate that it's within your regulatory purview, you can still say there is concern that the developer should address whatever. You can mention it.
So are you saying, Marianne, that we could say something like that we suggest that the developer conduct a flood study in order to, or?
I don't think you can make that kind of very specific. I mean, you can say what you want, actually.
They're going to have to meet the DEP stormwater standards, which includes some of that work, as well as trying to think of how, I'm trying to think of how how the road itself, to make sure that it's not flooded. I guess
you're not trying to find a solution for the developer. You're just raising the issue that it
Right.
needs to be considered.
How about we have these sentences here to get through this? People comment on this stormwater and flood control section now. I can add something here that made a difference. Further study will be needed.
I'm good with that.
Try to
think that works.
Okay. Any other comments about these three little paragraphs here? Um, before we move on to wildlife. We can come back and look at it all together after this, but I guess I'm going to move on to wildlife.
I say move on.
We had the simpler thing here. Yeah, I wanted to make sure the word fragmentation's in there. Again, it's a matter of that. This is something that's going to come up when we have our regulatory hearing.
I have a
do-
question for you all about the issue of wildlife fragmentation.
Yeah,
If mass housing looks at the map of the area, it's a little hard to argue that there's going to be fragmentation of wildlife area, because all the way around the back and for part of the western side, it's all intact. That is, unless they want to travel straight along Farm Road, the wildlife has a lot of ways to get from one place to another there. So I think, maybe you could give a little more detail as to what kind of wildlife would be impeded.
yeah. I mean, my original note was I wasn't sure whether this is an issue to deal with at this level.
Yeah, and I just made it its own heading, just thinking if we're going to raise a third issue, it should be presented the same as the other two issues. But I mean, I think everything that Carol wrote, it's very detailed, so I'm not sure it all seems like good information, but I don't know if we need that much detail.
Yeah, I just want to know whether we want it just at the highest level, just whether we want to, how much we want to highlight the issue. I just want to get to that point, and then we can figure out what detail we want to include and not include on this, because right, there are issues of, I mean, depending on how the issues go with land subject to flooding, that mainly is a flood control issue there, but it's also in the state regulations, which we'll deal with when we get to the NOI. They do raise the fact that wildlife habitat is one of the other interests to think about with land subject to flooding. But at this point here, and the idea of whether we want passages or not passages, I guess, yeah, I don't know. What do other people think? I'm sort of
I
obviously.
don't think we should go crazy on this, because I'm not sure how interested mass housing is in wildlife habitat. I think we should certainly bring it up as something, a local thing that we want the developer to look into. But I mean, I just think there has to be some happy medium between, one sentence and what Carol has written. Like maybe you could flesh it out slightly, but I wouldn't go too far beyond that. Like Marion said, just to clarify what the concern is or why we're concerned.
Yeah, right. It is a, right. There are wetlands there. The project is between the two wetlands, as opposed to how creatures go above. And if anything, we're going to have a disruption because we have the house at 55. If that's the address. There's going to be another, basically the closest conduit is already going to be disrupted by the house next door. That's going to be put up. That's new. That's not part of this project. And we're always suffering from I mean, not always, I don't accept it, but this fragmentation issue is a tremendous burden on the wildlife habitat issue. And
Yeah, I
okay,
guess, Michael, I guess I would say I included some of that. So there was some sense of context that there is a lot of habitat around here. I think there are two things probably that I think I do agree with you that the more significant thing is the fragmentation or, the disconnection between the two wetland areas. And that we don't really, that there should be, bottom line, I think there should be a wildlife habitat assessment because it is surrounded by a lot of natural habitat, a lot of conserved land. We really don't know what's there or what's in the wetlands. And, but I agree that the greater disruption from the point of view of our, our focus is going to be the potential disconnection of two pieces of wetlands by the development.
right. I mean, I think we're gonna have the wildlife study anyway as part of what would be a project of this scale, given its location. The question is, for the sake of this letter here, and what's worth expanding, and I have a third concern with the land project. Right, whether we want to add that there's going to be that further study is going to be needed and to consider possible design changes. Whether we just want to add the concept of a study in here, whether I'm not sure what more to add.
I think the one thought, Michael, that you were just talking about is further, there should be consideration given to design changes that restore continuity between the wetland areas. That would probably be, to my mind, one of the bigger things.
Right,
I don't
that's what we
know
have
exactly. Yeah, for the wetlands.
That minimize. Okay, thanks.
I would focus on here that would minimize
should be considered
Fragmentation.
and address fragmentation, if you want to get that word in there.
fragmentation between wetland areas or minimize barriers between wetland areas, I think is what I was having in mind. The other interesting thing, and the reason I included it, and to some extent, some of this verbiage here was also for the commission's understanding, is, again, I was looking at the guidance from Mass DEP for wildlife habitat, and they said alteration of 10% of the land in a resource area on a single lot or 5,000 square feet is deemed not impairing wildlife. I'm pretty sure that that we have more than 5,000 square feet of alteration, which implied that means that there is a potential to impair wildlife. So again, I think probably, Michael, it does come down to the idea that, similar to what we were talking about before, is there should be a wildlife habitat assessment on this.
Yeah, that's something we'll be discussing later.
Yeah.
Okay, what more? Are we happy with how's this little phrase here?
I think that looks good.
Yep.
It's 5:45.
Yep.
So obviously we're going to be dealing with this project at a couple levels there.
Yeah.
As we say, that's okay.
Are we at the point where we want to move to authorize you to make spell check and send this along?
Yep. I think so. Unless anybody wanted to read it anymore on the screen. Then I could, let's see, a file. Whoops. I save this as a different name.
Michael, could you send it to me as soon as you're done?
What do you mean? That's the only thing I live for.
There's Jeannie Guthrie and Diane Moores.
Um,
I'm going to forward it to town council.
what I was going to do here is I was going to just accept all the edits, and if anybody wanted to read through it for 5 minutes, let's see, review, track edits.
Honestly,
You don't want to see it anymore.
I would like to like, and maybe if Carol, because I know Carol is like very strict about commas and things, like if you guys both want to just read it over and fix any, you know, English language issues, I trust you guys. You don't overuse semicolons. I trust you guys. So I'm happy if we can make some kind
Here
of
it is.
motion.
I just simplified it all so that,
I agree.
Yeah.
okay, fine.
Can I ask something before we close out on this? One thing you left out, Michael, that I just realized when you go back down to the wildlife habitat is there's really no reference to the fact that it really is it really is kind of part of a wider interconnected ecosystem because of all of the natural land around it. Now, I take Marianne's point that one way of thinking about that is, well, there's plenty of remaining natural areas. So, you know, that's okay. This is just a small development. But I think it might be worth noting that, you know, that this is the property. And the other thing that I want to point out is that it has historically only had, I believe, the two structures, the single family house and the barn. The rest of the land was left in a natural state. So there's going to be quite a change here. And, you know, we know that it's part of this, a broader, healthy ecosystem.
Right. It has more, it's part of the logic that we have where certain things are worth protecting because they're part of a better, broader, better
Right.
healthy system as opposed to an isolated.
That's right. And I think we should say there, abutting, you know, I don't even know how many acres of town forest.
Does my little phrase cover enough of it?
I would suggest saying something about the fact that it abutting town forests and conservation lands at the very least.
Is it town forest? I guess that's
It
above.
is, it's a combination of town forest, it's Pine Hill Forest, town forest, and which starts over by Pine Hill and extends toward that area. And then right next to it is a small piece of conservation land.
Okay,
And
does
then
this do it for you?
More, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
I move that we accept this letter as now written and edited, subject to some minor cleanup by the chairs.
Second.
Any discussion?
When you said minor cleanup by the chairs, I think she was suggesting also me, and I'm not a chair, so.
Okay, do you want,
Minor-
you're gonna read it?
We
You're
can
gonna
make
read
a
it?
friendly amendment and substitute.
Subject to
one
Michael
chair
and
for
Carol.
Carol. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Because I'll
Just to
send this
be
to you for,
accurate.
okay, so we now have an amended motion. It's basically, we're accepting the letter as the memo as edited, subject to grammatical cleanup by Michael and Carol. And we have a second. Do we have a second for that?
Oh, yes, we second that too.
Um,
I'll second it all.
I guess we could have, one thing I forgot to do as part of discussion, I'm going to do this. What I forgot to do is ask, does anybody in the audience care to make a comment? Which I forgot to do, open it up to the public. Even though we don't have a lot of time here. Does anybody want to raise their hand or say something?
All set, Michael. Thank you. This was thrilling listening to this. Thank you.
Okay. I don't detect any sarcasm whatsoever.
Oh, it was very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, watch your tone now. Okay, roll call vote. Michael, aye. Carol?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Okay,
adjourn.
you have no other business? Somebody move to
I
adjourn?
just did move to adjourn.
Okay. Did somebody second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Michael, I. Carol,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
and Courtney.
Aye, Captain.
Oh, geez, there we go. There's the respect I've been looking for. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the little special meeting here. We'll see.
We have a
ourselves-
brief dinner break before advisory.
Oh, yes. I guess the broader discussion for people interested will be in tomorrow night at the select board. And then we'll see everybody else in whatever, 9 days at our next meeting. Okay. Oh, actually, no, we'll see each other. Don't forget the training. See you guys at the next meeting too.
Oh, I totally forgot. It's going to be great.
Okay, let me see if I can learn how to turn this thing
All right.
off.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.